Hi, folks. I am coming to you from my deck. It's a little windy out here, but it's quieter out here than inside my house. And apologies in advance if my daughter ends up joining us as a guest lecturer. Okay, this week we are getting into Chekhov. I am going to warn you right now that I love Chekhov. My heart's beating. I'm getting excited. Here we go. Like our man Henrik Ibsen from the last few weeks, Chekhov was also a realist. So we're sticking around with our learning about realism. We're diving more and more into realism here with Chekhov over the next couple of weeks. We're going to use what we learned about realism so far, and we're going to add to it. Chekhov, like Ibsen, he was a revolution. He was a Russian playwright, and his collaboration with Stanislavski and their work with the Moscow Art Theater shaped probably everything we do in theater to this day. Chekhov and Stanislavski are credited basically with creating modern drama, and we'll get to Stanislavski some more next week. Okay, so again, thinking about realism being revolutionary might be a little hard for us to imagine, but in Chekhov's time, for the audience to be sitting there and the audience to be used to melodrama, think about like soap opera acting, where everyone's very tragic, very over the top. Think about the stock characters that we learned about if you took Theater History 1 with me. In the Commedia dell'arte, the very stereotypical type characters. And their audiences, and they're used to these opulent sets, these over-the-top sets. And then the curtain rises on Chekhov's Uncle Vanya, and the audience sees people who are dressed like them. And the characters are smoking cigarettes and complaining about work and eating and drinking. And an enormous amount happens without really anything happening in the plot. And people are being forced to deal with the dramas of daily life. And there's not always a happy ending. This was a revolutionary way to tell a story. It's so beautiful. I love it. I love it. Side note, Chekhov's day job was a doctor, a medical doctor. Oh, be still my heart, y'all. Okay, some things to look out for in Uncle Vanya. Are you ready? The internal journeys of the characters and what they're going through on the inside are really almost more important, honestly more important, than any kind of action or plot of the play. The way in which people behave during even the most kind of underwhelming, non-action driven moments reveal just as much, if not more, about those characters' wants and needs than any spoken words do. So we're looking for some subtext here. All right, let's talk about what's going on in Russia at the time that Chekhov is writing Uncle Vanya. None of this stuff is maybe explicitly discussed at length in the play, but I think from a theater history perspective, we have to acknowledge that it's always sort of there, lurking around in the background. Okay? The Industrial Revolution is going on, and it's gradually changing the workforce. So the peasant class and people who work the land, and people who work estates and farms, like the one in Uncle Vanya, are discovering new job opportunities in factories and things like that. Also, there is a massive distinction in Russia at the time between urban life and rural life, and between the people who live these types of lives. A massive distinction. And we kind of see this with Yelena and the professor, who have moved away from the university and away from the city because they can't afford to live there anymore, and they've returned to the country estate, and there is such a culture clash. Also, Chekhov is writing Uncle Vanya and these characters at the turn of the century. Uncle Vanya was written in 1897 and it opened in 1899. So you don't get much more turn of the century than that, right? Right before 1900. Um, Maybe not a lot of you remember or were even alive for the turn of this last century when we went from 1999 to 2000, which we called Y2K back then. I remember it because I was a senior in college, and it was wackadoo, y'all. It was crazy. People tend to get very antsy at the dawn of a new age. Normal everyday things kind of take on more importance because they're very emblematic of the times. And I'm going to go there. People get a little crazy. What does all this have to do with Uncle Vanya? Well, anxiety about the future shows up everywhere in this play. The country folk don't want the city slickers to sell their farm out from under them. Some characters are a little freaked out about the industry's effects on the environment. No one knows if their crushes are going to work out. Some people waste their entire lives working for others or loving those who don't love them back. No one really specifically discusses much of this stuff outright, but also, again, the Industrial Revolution is going on, and you know, think about nowadays. People get anxious about, like, should I buy this smartphone or should I wait for the next one to come out because da 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 da, and our computer is going to take over our lives and make me obsolete and not be able to get a job. I mean, people get stressed out about this now, and that's an underlying current in Uncle Vanya as well. I mean, they're not worried about smartphones. They're still concerned about the invention of the chainsaw. But keep an eye on Dr. Ostrov. He's very concerned about certain issues like this. And, wait. They're still worried about, like, is there going to be a tomorrow? Again, it's the end of the century, and sometimes people at the ends of centuries aren't so sure about that. So Uncle Vanya was written at a time when all kinds of things were changing, and the Russian Revolution, was kind of right around the corner. That's coming like 20 more years from now. So what do these characters do in this play? In the face of all this change, do they meet the challenges head on and work together to usher in a bright new future? Well, some would argue they all just do nothing. That they're all just miserable and they don't do anything to solve their problems and they just blame everybody else. And meanwhile, the world is changing and life goes on and it's leaving them behind. Some would argue that. I'm not sure I fully agree with that assessment, but I can't fully disagree with it either. What do you think? I want to hear your thoughts this week in our discussion board about Uncle Vanya and some of the stuff that I've mentioned in this lecture. So if you need to rewatch it to be able to participate in the discussion board this week, then go right on ahead. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. This is a beloved play for me. Let's dig in and talk some more this week about this play and Chekhov and some more realism. Enjoy!